I was so happy that my wish came true, that the heavens answered my prayers, that adult horror authors are finally getting their toes wet. They're sticking their feet in the deep end. They're going like, well, not deep end, in this case, shallow end, but they're going like, hey man, we were in the deep end of the pool. We were used to doing all types of crazy drills. Let's get into that shallow end and start flexing a little bit. That's what I was hoping for when adult horror authors start writing kids' horror books. Why do I want that to happen? Because adult horror authors are very proficient at writing some of the scariest, most terrifying, most hair-raising, spine-tingling stuff with amazing villains, amazing action, amazing visuals. Now that applies to some of my favorite authors. I know it for a fact, such as Joe R. Lansdale, Tim Curran, Nathan Ballinger, Joe Hill, Stephen King in his prime, and some other authors that are kind of escaping me right now, but those are basically my all-stars. And you got kids horror authors who have pumped out a lot of good stuff. Those guys who are out there like Neil Shusterman, like R.L. Stine, like some other folks, they've already done a lot of kids horror stuff, and they've pumped out some stuff which is pretty memorable, pretty iconic, pretty well written, well done for kids horror. So you have two sides of the spectrum pumping out cool stuff. And what happens when those worlds synchronize and merge together? The hope was some good shit would pump out, such as Jeff Strand. Jeff Strand is an adult horror author who started writing middle grade horror. He has a book called the Eek series, and all three books that have come out have had generally positive reviews, especially the first one, and the new one I believe is called Finder Keepers. Those books I've seen people giving 5 out of 5 stars, 10 out of 10s, and some reviewers who I know have read adult horror and read a lot of kids horror, meaning that this guy's pumping out that good quality stuff. So you could possibly guess that my excitement for me hearing another adult horror author doing his middle grade horror debut would be some exciting news. And it was. That's why I spent $10 on Kindle for a book, double what I usually pay for Kindle books, because I was like, you know what? That's the manifestation tax. We're going to expense it to the heavens because I got my prayers answered. But little did I know that the guy who was going to be writing a middle grade horror book transitioning over was some diet horror, gluten-free, book club type of motherfucker who's usually the main ones they're promoting at Barnes and Noble. I didn't realize that until I got 80 pages into a book called Another by Paul Tremblay. Paul Tremblay is not an author who I've read a lot of stuff from. I read one adult horror short story by him called In Bloom, and I thought it was mid, kind of cringy. I know he's got a book called like The Cabin in the Woods at the End of the World or something like that that apparently gets good praise. I know he's got a book called Horror Movie with like a little VHS tape on the cover that I heard good things about. So I was like, okay, I know this guy is kind of book club horror-ish. And when I say book club horror, I know some people get all up in arms like, oh, what do you mean book club horror? We love great stuff. We love those type of things. You know, we love great horror authors. I know there's some of you people out there. But when you see a book that has a lot of ratings, a lot of good reviews, and you go to Goodreads and the people who are reviewing it are like middle-aged women, all goth, blue in their hair, and you go to the books that they've read and they usually read other fantasy and rom-coms and stuff like that, and they don't read horror, hardcore horror, real scary, action-packed, violent, creepy, gruesome kind of stuff. They just read your more basic stuff. This is the type of book that's going to appeal to them. And for some reason, those people are still coming out of the woodwork when it comes to Another by Paul Tremblay. This is his middle grade debut book, and it was ass. Okay? 85 pages into this book. I was thinking about making a review. I was hoping I'd be excited. And this book is so boring. It is so meandering. It is so mind-numbingly sloppy, even for kids' horror standards. It's not scary. It talks about body horror, and there's barely any body horror with like in the first third of the book. And then when I had a fellow reviewer go ahead and skip ahead to some random pages later in the book, which eventually he found one of the big reveals because me and him were sort of on our last straw when it came to this book, it was still just as cringy, just as goofy, just as meandering as it was in the beginning, first third. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm DNFing this book. Another by Paul Tremblay. I don't want to talk too much about the plot because, again, I had to DNF this book like 33% in. It's basically about this kid who had something happen to him called the Zoom incident, where he was on Zoom and he has some facial tics or mental challenge kind of things, which make him a little bit more awkward in public. He's got some social cue problems, which isn't his fault. But basically, some kids had taken some viral video of him locally where he was not able to read properly some passage on Zoom. They started making fun of him. He got some kid expelled, and then he ended up being kind of a social loner. So his parents end up getting this very vintage rotary phone, which sounds extremely strange. The ringtone is not normal. And of course, he gawks over, oh, rotary phone, what a fossil thing. Typical cliche stuff. And eventually a phone call comes on the rotary phone from this friend who apparently is getting invited for a sleepover over to his house, which is unique because he's not had any friends that he made in this past year or so, ever since the pandemic happened. And the parents don't question who the person is. They don't even try to find out who the person is. When the kid asks who that guy is, there's no answer. And then eventually the kid comes to their house for this sleepover, and the parents are kind of looking forward to it. And there's a guy who comes in with this giant brown potato sack kind of thing, and out from the sack crawls a kid who's described to be like super gray in the skin. It looks like he's made out of like Play-Doh or clay. He's unable to show emotions. He like has to basically stretch his face and move his eyes and scrunch his eyebrows with his fingers in order for his face to make expressions. And all this other really weird, obscure, bizarre stuff, which the parents don't fucking question at all. They just act like it's normal. There's not even a second care or glance. Later in the book, you get some hints that maybe some fishy stuff happened in the beginning because some gray dust is blown in their face by this guy who claims to be this kid's father. And the parents don't say anything. The kid, who's out of range and kind of suspicious, doesn't say anything, which is weird because anytime you read kids' horror, the kids are still competent enough to question stuff. This guy just kind of takes it in like, might as well just accept it. Like, what? And the entire book is just fucking anime references. The kid talking about him watching Naruto and anime and One Punch Man, which, as an anime fan, as a guy who watches anime and reads manga, the fact that that has to get brought up like every other page is just cringe. It's just padding. It's just filler. It's just weird. He keeps talking about Zoom and the pandemic and COVID and all this stuff just to be like hip and cool and that type of lingo and that type of modern stuff. You know, this book, when you're reading it, feels like a fucking trying to be hip college professor making a diet horror, gluten-free kids horror book for a group of 30-year-old book club women. It is what it is. You know, I don't give a fuck how you think about me stereotyping. It's what it is. If you read it, you know. And it's boring as fuck. And it's lame as hell. And it's not interesting. It's just the facts. I don't care. It's what it is. And when you look at all the Goodreads reviews, you look at all the Amazon reviews, you look at all the ratings and publishers talking about the book, it doesn't take a genius to realize it's a bunch of paid shills or motivated shills who are just promoting the book. Because I have read a shit ton of kids' horror books. My whole channel was founded on middle grade horror. Other reviewers that I've seen read kids' horror and talk about kids' horror and also at the same time experience adult horror, the other end, do not enjoy this type of absolute slogfest. It is so boring. It is so meandering. There's nothing happening in the fucking book. Even 80 pages in, nothing's happening. And mind you, this book, this middle grade kids horror read, is 250 pages. Do you know what the average length of a kids horror book, a middle grade read, is? 120 to 140 pages, sometimes 150 if it's meant to be a little longer. Okay, that's what's meant for middle schoolers. That's what meant for younger kid reads when it comes to the horror genre. You've seen it when it comes to series like Goosebumps, Bone Chillers, Spine Tinglers, the Are You Afraid of the Dark books, even newer books like Monster Street and stuff like that. So I don't know what motivated Tremblay, according to my reviewer friend. Shout out to Horror FFA. It's literally a 250-page book. The book is double the length of a normal kid's horror book. And on top of that, the dude decided to make it so boring. It's literally like a slice of life, day in the life type of thing of a kid just playing video games, watching Legend of Zelda video game walkthroughs, watching anime like Naruto and One Punch Man, worrying about what other kids think about him, his drawing obsession with animals and random shit, his parents taking him to a baseball game practice where his dad's supposed to be normally your, hey, pat on the back, participation trophy kind of guy, and then the one time he yells at him, the kid is like about to break out and start crying. It's just random shit. And the villain moral is supposed to be a doppelganger. It's supposed to be a guy who's supposed to be like taking over the main character's life, kind of being like a new clone that takes over his family. And it is so dragged on. It takes so long for anything to even start happening. And it's not creepy stuff. The kid like opens up his belly and there's like flab storage to put in like paper drawings that he takes from the kid. What? There's like the most body horror you get in the book is that, and the kid gets a little bug bite on the back of his neck while he's sleeping, the main character, and he's uncomfortable because he wants to scratch it, but he doesn't want to move because he thinks that the kid who's sleeping in his room got up and maybe is looking at him. This is the most lame shit I've ever read. This is literally diet gluten-free kids horror. And you know why that's bad? Because kids horror books, as they are meant to be more PG, more tame, more held back. So how the fuck are you an adult horror author going to kids horror and making it way more childish and way more kiddie and way more boring and way more cringy and way more Lord have mercy than normal kids horror authors who do this shit on the regular are doing? Paul Tremblay was not born yesterday. He clearly knows, I would hope, unless he lives under a fucking rock, about Goosebumps, about other middle grade horror reads. I would hope that if he's diving into this new genre, this new pathway, that he might have at least read some Goosebumps books before or have read other stuff. So why he would go in this direction made no fucking sense. And it pisses me off even more, bruh, because this is not what I wanted when I made that video. When I made that video, my discussion video on my channel, which isn't, you can go on my discussion playlist and find it, or you can just scroll down on my channel and see it. It wasn't too long ago. It was like a couple of months ago. I talked about adult horror authors getting into kids horror because I expected that if these guys are making, at least my favorite authors so far, are making some of the creepiest, most horrifying, horrific scenes of, action and violence and villains and tension and atmosphere and setting and environments and creative story ideas and even world building sometimes, that if they went into kids horror, it would be like an NBA player going and playing at like a college game or a high school game. It's like these guys would be able to literally knock it out of the park. It would be like an MMA fighter then going in a sparring match with gloves. It's like, dude, he's holding back. But even if he's holding back, you still see his technique, his strategy, his ability, his adaptability, that kind of stuff. Even if he's not able to go all out, he would still show a much better result and performance than a lot of other kids horror authors who have only done kids horror, have never done adult horror and pushed themselves like it. That's why R.L. Stine, when he started writing adult horror, was not well received. He wasn't able to do a good job. But that's why a guy like Jeff Strand, who went from adult horror to kids horror, was able to push the envelope and do a very good job, according to many reviewers. Many people who I know experience both genres. So that was the whole point. And it's funny, man, because the horror authors that I imagine writing kids horror were my top dogs. So I'll pop up a picture right here. You got Joe R. Lansdale. This guy's one of the most creative minds out there, one of the most versatile. he has the ability to literally write books that you would never imagine, short story ideas that you could never imagine. He's that type of guy that he wakes up from a dream and starts writing it down. It's that level of creativity and novelty. And he wrote a kid's horror story, basically, even though it was never officially labeled as one, called The Companion. And that short story is one of the best kids' horror short stories I've ever read in my life. I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. Fantastic. About a kid who stumbles upon a farm out in the woods, deals with a crazy scarecrow situation. Very intense, very creepy. It's like a scarecrow vampire mix kind of thing. It was extremely well done. So that guy already showed his chops. Then you have Nathan Ballinger. This guy has some of the best world building that you will ever see in the horror genre. Yes, he can make terrifying monsters. He's a good writer. He writes tension and atmosphere well. But this guy's level of world building is genius. It's something I've only seen with the top level manga artists that I follow, like Ichiro Oda from One Piece. So the fact that this guy can do that and show off his writing chops in many different story ideas. He's very versatile as well. He would be perfect to do a kid's horror story. He could make some shit that would generally be really well written, really intense, really personable, and at the same time have nice world building and all that stuff. Even if he has to make a novella, he would do a good job, because I've seen him do it with adult horror novellas of pretty much equal lengths, if not a little shorter. Tim Curran. Don't need to fucking say anything. I've talked this guy up for the entire fucking channel. Tim Curran writes the most horrific, terrifying monstrosities and villains and creatures and things known to man. He is the king of the monsters. He's Godzilla, bruh. He is the king of the monsters, the king of creature features. He has absolutely fantastic action, the type of action that makes you feel like you're immersed and watching a movie. It does not feel like you're slogging through a book. It feels like you're in front of a screen watching a movie if you got the right imagination. It is amazing stuff, man. I mean, this guy writes shit that looks fucking out of pocket and crazy for adult horror. I mean, this guy has had plenty of examples, stuff that I've gone over that shows his level of creativity and mastery of making threats. So can you imagine that guy who writes fantastic monsters, horrifying scenes, absolutely splendid action, trying out kids' horror? He'd be able to do a great job. And you know what's funny? He actually pretty much tried at kids horror, or at least the closest thing to it, in a short story I read from him from a book called Bone Marrow Stew. This short story is called Queen of the Spades, and just to get to the section with the kids, these kids are in a cemetery in this sort of post-apocalyptic world, and they encounter this ghoulish maiden, a zombie ghoul kind of maiden wraith thing, and this is a candy witch. She has the ability to manipulate your 5 senses, and she makes the kids hallucinate that she's this beautiful, golden-haired, wonderful woman who smells like all these amazing candies, and she's producing candies from her body in various huge amounts that they just start eating and consuming to their heart's content, and eventually they get so full and sick that when they fall asleep and the sister wakes up, her little brother is gone. He's been abducted. He's disappeared. And you find out that this ghoul, maiden, witch, demon kind of thing basically used that manipulation of the 5 senses to make the kids eat dirt, worm, bugs, and other nasty stuff straight out of the cemetery. And they kept eating it, thinking it was this delicious candy until they got stuffed, sick, and couldn't move. And then it's discovered that she does this to many children who wander by her graveyard that she protects. And when she brings the kids into an open grave and dumps them, you see all these other half-eaten kids. So it's horrific. She keeps them for storage to eat later. And when the parents and, well, not parents, but the older sibling figures basically come and they've dealt with this type of creature before, find a way to beat it using a ritual and very specific tactics like mirrors and salt and other stuff, you eventually find out that if you don't do the ritual properly, whoever is the victims can turn into a similar type of creature and figure, which happens to the brother. They didn't put salt and do the right rituals on him out of grief and out of reluctance to basically end his soul in life. and put him to peace. And because of that human weakness, he ends up becoming basically the same type of creature and same type of abilities and same type of hunger that ghoul maiden witch was. So that's Tim Curran, who's never done kids horror, trying whatever it is the closest to it, and he completely, I mean completely, obliterates Paul Tremblay out of the water. He completely obliterates the guy. It is hilarious that a guy who wasn't officially trying to do kids horror completely obliterated a guy who's been promoting the fuck out of his book, getting all these review and ratings, and then the book turns out to be utter fucking dog shit. So yeah, I want what I consider to be my all-stars, my favorite authors, Joe Hill, Neil Shusterman, Joe R. Lansdale, Tim Curran, Nathan Ballinger, any other guy. I want those guys call to action. I don't care what it takes. I don't care if I have to perform a fucking voodoo ritual against their children to make them get into it. These guys need to get into the ring and start making kids horror, because we do not need book club, diet horror ass motherfuckers getting in the ring and making kids horror. Because if that popular, regurgitated, recycled, Barney the Dinosaur, PBS sponsored kid ass dog shit is the stuff that gets popular, and other people who could write way better stuff and other kids horror authors who had way better portfolios are getting outshined, I'm about to crash the fuck out. I'm about to crash the fuck out, man. And Paul Tremblay, if you hear somebody scratching outside your window, just know it was the tree branches. Listen, if you wake up with fucking whipped cream and feathers and tar on your face, it's not my fault. Don't look at me, brother. Don't look at me. All right? That's all I gotta say. That was my rant video. I just had to go off and go crazy because I was so pissed off that what I asked for, what I made a video on, came true slowly and surely. And the second entry to my manifestation coming true was this piece of boring ass shit. That's all I got for today, man. This book gets a 2 out of 10 awful. You don't want to hear the rest about this book, believe me. And I'll tell you this. One of the later pages that was scrolled to outside of what I read was revealing the whole doppelganger thing. You know, the fact that this moral kid is a clone, becoming a clone of the main character. And his one-liner to end off a cliffhanger for the chapter was, "I'm so hungry I could eat a bear."
What? Is what, the 5th best center in the history of the NBA?
What?
Fifth.
What?
Jack, what do you mean what?
Who's the 4 ahead of Shaquille O'Neal? Have you lost your damn mind?
What? You want me to name
Sure,
him?
go ahead. Go
Kareem.
ahead. But he wasn't Shaq.
Help, Lord.
Malone led the league in rebounding 6
So
consecutive.
what? You good, man?
No. Fuck.
No!
That's it. Have a great day.